I'll turn it over to Dean just real quick. Just so if anyone's not familiar with SRM, we are a consulting firm that does vendor sourcing, contract negotiation, advisory services, and real pleased to have someone from RTP, Cheryl, on to give an overview today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dean. You can do some more introductions, and I'll make sure I let people come into the lobby here.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Larry, and welcome everybody. My name is Dean Nolan. I'm Managing Director of our Commercial Payments Practice at SRM. And today on Tech Talks, we're going to be discussing the status of instant payments in the US, and then doing a deeper dive into the value drivers and business cases being seen by some of the participating banks and credit unions. Joining me today is Cheryl Gruz, Real-Time Payments Product Manager at the Clearinghouse. Welcome, Cheryl.
Hi, Dean. Thanks for the invite.
Hey, no problem. And hey, before we jump into our discussion, I thought it might be good just for you to give a quick overview of your role at the Clearinghouse and some of the, and kind of what the Clearinghouse is doing before we jump into real-time payments.
Thanks. So I work for the Clearinghouse, and it's not the company that gives balloons and awards out. We're actually a payments company. We are the Clearinghouse, not Publishers Clearinghouse. And we have been, for the last 100 or so years, been a private operator of payment systems in the United States. So many are familiar on this call with ACH, wire systems, check systems, and RTP is the new kid on the block. But we, the Clearinghouse, actually run the hardware, we're the utility, we're the pipes for the chips, the EPN, the SVP code, and now the RTP network. We operate in the United States along with the Federal Reserve Bank as the public utility operator, and we're the private utility operator. We are owned by 21 banks in the United States. We provide services to all banks in the United States, just not our owner community. And we have been processing these chips and ACH payments. ACH, I heard yesterday, is going to be 50 years old this year. Payments for 50 years, and wires, I think, was the 1920s, and checks, well, way before any of us were born. So RTP joined the body of products in 2017 in November. We actually introduced this new payment type, trying to keep up with the global real-time payment networks. Our owner banks decided to move ahead, listen to the marketplace. People are asking for immediate, instant settlement clearing of their payments. We built it, and now we are, in a BAU environment, a true operating environment, probably for the last year, even though we're 6 years in existence. And FedNow joined us as a network in the instant payment arena in this year, July of 2023. So there's two of us, but there's always been two of us. There's EPN through the Clearinghouse, and Fed ACH through the Fed. There's chips on the Clearinghouse, and there's Fed Wire on the Federal Reserve Bank. And now there's going to be FedNow on the instant payment front, and RTP on the real-time payment front. I just have to say it, Dean, you and I have talked about this numerous times. Naming us RTP as a network was like the worst branding decision anyone's ever made. We didn't pay a lot of money for it, but it's hard saying, oh, real-time payments in the RTP network. FedNow comes on, it's like, it should be Fed later, it should be RTP now or something. How I just go off, but that's enough. This Thursday afternoon after a very long day in New York City for me.
Hey, well, yeah, and thanks for the overview. I like the revised branding. That would be fun. But hey, thinking about that, the Clearinghouse, launched in 2017, launched RTP in 2017. You've been in the market for a little bit over 6 years. Seen some press releases lately and other comments. But how are things going?
Wonderful. As an RTP product manager, I think we're doing great. It's all in the eyes of the beholder. Someone will say not enough, but for us, it's yes. Trying to start a network, as I just mentioned, it's 50 years of ACH, and they're still trying to get people to go on direct deposit. So in the United States, we keep adding payment networks and not mandating. So you're adding the complexity of choices. And so it takes a while for the US marketplace to get educated and banks to build. So where we're at right now is we think in a good place. Of course, we always aim for better, and we'll continue to grow the network. But right now we have 485 banks. I wouldn't even say banks or FIs. It's financial institutions, which could be banks, credit unions, community banks on the network. That represents, we kind of talk about reach. How can what does it reach? And it really reaches 66% of DDA accounts in the United States. And another metric is that it reaches over 80% of banks on the ACH send system. So the reach on the ACH side, I think, is something we might be looking at is using that as our metric, because again, in the United States, there's 9,000 plus banks. Some say 10,000, some say 9,000. So you say, oh, we only have 485 of those financial institutions, but that equals 66% of all checking accounts in the United States. That makes over 9,000 banks to get to the rest of the 34%. And I don't think there's 2 banks left that would add 1% to that number. So it's the long game now, it's that long tail, and we are continuously to engage, seeing momentum, banks coming on. They know that this is the place to be. With those 485 banks, we have processed 624 million payments to date. I think that's a big number. And that includes $263 billion. So it runs 24/7. It is settling every second of the day, and it's handling big numbers on a daily basis. We are open 24/7, and we have volume 24/7. Every hour there is volume on that network. Again, we do something, we monitor every once in a while around the clock volume chart is what I call it. And you will see that the highest point of volumes is like 6 or 7%. And around 5 Eastern time, 3 or 5 Eastern time, if I remember correctly. But there's 2 to 3% of the total day's volume happening at 2, 3, 4 a.m. So people are taking advantage of having a network that is on your time and not a banker's time. There's no cutoffs. West Coasters are loving it. They have an extra 3 hours, 4 hours over ACH. They're not getting a sheet of paper when a company comes to do ACH. They're not receiving a sheet of paper that says, hey, company, at this bank, you have to have your file and the processing there by 3:30 in the afternoon. Corporates, businesses, consumers can just put a request in 24/7. So it's allowing us to use the network when we want to use the network. If I'm a night bird, I'll use it at night. If I'm an early bird, I'll use it in the morning. I will use it even if my bank's open or my bank is closed, because it's available to me anytime during day or night, 365, 366 days of the year. What else can I say? Our average dollar is up to $514. It has been growing because in April of 2022, we increased the limit to $1 million. Since we increased the limit to $1 million in April of 22, we've had over 89,000 payments on the network, over 100,000. So we're seeing a lot of activity. We're seeing people becoming more familiar with it. We have 213,000 unique business originators. 213 businesses across the United States have tried and used real-time payments as a payment method with their bank. I just think that number grows. It's a 59% increase since January. In January, that was 103,000. It's 213, 59% increase from January to December. So the banks are getting the message out there that there's a new payment rail in town. It's got some great enhancements. We do not consider ourselves as a lift and shift. You're not going to see people lift all their volume up from ACH and move it to us. It's a purposeful network for when you want the value that this 24/7 brings. And
Wow,
another
Cheryl.
question, another comment I just remember is we have 4.7 million consumers that have had a real-time payment.
Wow.
They sent them. Mhm.
Yeah, those are some impressive numbers and growth and everything. And 213,000 businesses. Well, that's a big number. Cheryl, as you guys are looking at that, what use cases are driving that volume?
A lot on the network, and you're going to see it on FedNow, is the early adopters, right? This is new technology. This wasn't just take a file from ACH payments and move it over. This is developing a brand new network with new message types, the ISO 20022. So what we have seen in the last couple years is the early adopters seem to be more technical, agile. Just being 24/7. I know one comment from a bank, which I won't mention who the bank was. It just cracks me up. It's like they were looking for some developers to try to get in this 24/7 mode on the wholesale side of the business. And they're like, we've got to figure out how to bring over a couple folks from the ATM retail side of the bank, because my developers want to go home at 6 p.m. And those retail guys are used to 24/7 with an ATM and with things going on. So it is really a mind shift. And you're seeing that, I think, on the first use cases. 49.99% of our volume is digital wallet defunding. What does that mean? Is that someone that has a personal wallet, like, a closed network wallet, such as PayPal or Venmo, they want to get money into their checking accounts immediately to bring it into the US banking system. That is driving the disbursements, them and gaming wallets, the entertainment gaming wallets. So that's what's happening on the large dispersers. And it makes sense, right? Those are very large dispersers. They're being generated by those wallet companies. And, think about, I haven't looked yet, but I'm excited about, the wild card weekend and next weekend's playoffs. And then you have Super Bowl. Last year's Super Bowl was probably one of our biggest days because of all those winnings, because it's all disbursements, me to me, going off. And we're also seeing some brokerage in there, which is real interesting. And we actually have some banks that have built their own online account to account. They're competing with their Zelle products. They're taking it in-house and building their own account to account using the flexibility of the ISO 2022 message that gives them messaging along with data. So a lot of reasons some of the banks are building their own A2A interfaces. The second largest one are cash advance disbursements, loan disbursements. So we're seeing a lot of disbursements. One of the very first use cases on this network were PPL loans. I know we have short memories and COVID is behind us from completely being locked down. But when that PPL loan came from the SBA and from the government, many of the first banks on the network use that as an opportunity to disperse the funds after the PPL loans were being approved. So we still have loan disbursements and cash advances on short-term personal loans on the network, driving almost 17% of the volume. We then go to the gig economy payouts. Those are my favorite. Those are our lovely drivers that I talk to one every time I go to the airport, and I get most of my insight and intelligence from the driver. They'll tell me what banks are down, why they moved to another bank because their bank didn't have it. So it's very interesting in that gig economy that they can draw down the wages. And think how important it is. You want to continue to drive and you need some gas. It's immediately into their checking account. They can go to the gas station or the ATM and pull out the cash. These are money now is what is driving these use cases. The same with the closed network disbursements. I want my money now. I need that $10 from my that someone paid me via PayPal or Venmo. I need it because I need to go to the grocery store. The grocery store doesn't take Venmo or PayPal. So there's when you look at these use cases, it's the value of it's the value of now. Sorry about that. It's a screensaver on here. And then you have earned wage access that is really starting to move up. Earned wage access, different than the cash advances. It's those companies that are integrated with the employer's payroll. So if I work today and I had $100 earned, these companies know I earned 100. It's not a disbursement. It's not a loan. It's taking my monies earned. It's kind of what the gig economies are doing, but using a third party and doing integration into employee. That is growing. That's about 10% today. And we see that number just taking off. As on-demand payroll as a whole is replacing much of the traditional payroll in parts of the United States, really segments, hospitality, restaurants in the United States today. And then merchant settlements. I think this is perfect for community banks and credit unions to realize they have a lot of the small businesses and the DBAs that power the United States and the economy, the commerce. And most of them are taking credit cards. They have to take credit cards, right? Debit cards, credit cards. There's so many of those little machines around that powers. People don't want to, give checks out or cash at farmers markets or whatever. Those folks are now with some of the major merchant settlers. Dean knows the name, words better than I do. I think they're acquirers, whoever they are. They are actually giving the option of dispensing their funds end of day. So you settle your machine at 5 o'clock. You will have those monies in your account by 8 p.m. Think about it. Then they can go, I'm a small business owner and I'm working all day. I have to go to my bank and start working on paying vendors and everyone else. I just been deposited the money I just brought in by a sale today. And I am really liquidity management 101, which is needed for the small business market. So that's a use case that we continue to talk about. But there's a bunch of other little ones like business to business and typical auto. We have some auto finance dealers, real estate are putting their toes in, brokerage under the account, micro deposits. I think many of us in the US are very aware when you go to open a new account or a loan, they want to make sure you have access to that checking account you gave them, and they're sending you by ACH a few cents. And the next day the ACH come, and then you got to try to find the interface to go back to put those pennies, the numbers. I could never find my way back. So I abandon almost every time. So many of the smart companies are now using RTP for those micro deposits, because as I'm on the phone or on the UI, as I'm entering, it's going to pop up on my checking account. I don't have to ever find my way back to whatever URL that was. I can put it right there. The companies that are doing are not having abandonment. So those are the kind of fun things that are happening in the network.
Well, there's a lot going on there. And what fascinated me is when you talk through those top 4 use cases. The first one and the wallets was really a consumer use case, and then you got into the loan disbursements, which was really the bank as an originator use case. And then you got into merchant settlement, which was B2B, and earned wage access, which was B2C, right? So you're really covering all aspects of payments in some of those first use cases. And I think that was just fascinating to see. I'm going to change the conversation a little bit now to talk about the banks and some of the banks and credit unions that are on the network. And a lot of the growth that we're seeing in the market and a lot of the customers we talk to are those smaller financial institutions, banks and or credit unions. And some of them are wondering, why to get on the network, what some of the value is. And especially on the credit union front, I noticed recently that Navy Federal Credit Union announced that they were on the RTP network. Just wondering if you had any insights you could share about their experiences and what they're finding.
Yeah, they were very excited. They weren't sure what to expect, kind of probably the same type of questions that many of your customers are asking. Why should I? what's this going to cost me? Am I going to have an investment return? Is it just going to be another one of those technical projects that's there, but no one's really leveraging it for value? And they did a press release because they were shocked at how many payments came to them within the first 24 hours. And, it was $2.7 million was received to them by day one. So it's an amazing number. It's a press release. It's real. It's, I can tell you it is real. It's not something, sometimes press releases aren't real. Those are the right numbers that came in, and it's continued to flow. And that money flows, and it will flow differently on every bank because of your customer base, because your customer has to do something. And this is, I think, the misnomer, as many banks will come on as a technology project. Oh, connectivity. Let's face it, those tech folks like to project, they like to tool with MQ and all those ISO formats and data elements, and they love to talk about connectivity and coming in. Well, there's also a second part of coming on the network, and that is, how do you communicate to your customer base that you have it, and why does it matter to them? Because they have to go to their earned wage access and make the selection for instant. They have to go to their closed wallet and make the selection for disbursement. They have to go to their gaming and tell them to do it instant. So it's not a intelligent routing at the banks. It is a selection by the customers of each bank. So what I really applaud Navy Federal for all that money, because they had a cross stakeholder discussions in the very beginning. They did a real good project plan, and they worked with their consultants in all multiple areas, and they communicated to their customer base, you have to do something. We're coming. It's, you can get ready, and as soon as we tell you it's live, you can go and start directing them this way. So it's really important that when any of your banks consider and to come into this, it is a technology project, and Dean knows more than anyone. Right up front, the technical is not easy. I've been on enough of these calls with digital certificates and MQ lines and all this other stuff that is important. But once you got it connected, it's usually like the Teams. It shows up every day. It's really getting the front office and the marketing teams to let their customer, the bank's customer base, know that you're part of this new generation, this digital, native digital now, and that you're able to receive this money when you feel like it, and not when someone else feels like it. And so that's why I think you see with the community and credit union folks, sometimes I think they are, and even the big banks, they're seeing it as a technology project instead of a product. Technology connects it, then it becomes a product development, it becomes a communication, a marketing effort. And that's what's needed to have all those pieces of the banks to come through. On our network today, I mentioned 485 banks, 91% of those are community banks and credit unions.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's a good.
They're the people on this call, your competitor down the street is probably on the network.
And Cheryl, I think that's a great point. You bring up the competitor, and going back to that earned wage access use case, I recall early on as that was rolling out, some of the surprise there being that employees at companies that had access to earned wage payroll were actually posting on their bulletin boards which banks participated or credit unions and which ones didn't, because those that participated, if you banked there, you got your money today. If you were at a financial institution that was still doing ACH, you weren't getting your earned wage access for 2 days, which kind of defeated the purpose of earned wage access.
Of why it's there, right? On demand,
yeah.
But in 2 days.
Exactly. Yeah, it was really good. And one other data point too that I thought was really fascinating. I did see that Navy Federal Credit Union press release, and $2.7 million of incoming deposits, which is what that was, in a day sounded impressive. when you take that times 365 days a year, that comes up to just about $1 billion, right? So the question was, where was that money going before? Right. And were those customers, you don't know, because it might have been coming in ACH, might have been going to a different institution. But it's just one of those things when you really look at it and understand that something that is impressive can be really impressive when you start to extrapolate it out to the time span in the year and everything. So, yeah, great story on that one.
And another thing you just mentioned, and that's where some financial institutions are nervous. We're not just shifting from ACH. This on-demand is completely a great example, and the gig economy. We used to have payroll every week in some of the segments, right? That once a week now is 5 payments. So the added 4 are coming to the RTP network, and usually they still have 1 payment, could have their traditional being netted, So it's incremental. The same with the many of the gig economy. They recently, one of the gig economy companies put a limit. I was watching, some of, we could always see enterprise a little bit as we're the operator, we're the plumbing, but I can watch some numbers, just data streams sometimes. I saw one customer 32 times make a payout as a gig worker in 12 hours. So, this whole thing about micro deposits or micro payments, right? Making more payments because you have the ability. There's one of the insurance companies that I know we've talked to at times. They're thinking of making, having us car drivers pay as you go. Like if you put so many miles on your car today, you're going to pay $2 for your insurance that day. And what real-time payments is really supporting the incremental ads, right? Yeah. It is, okay, now you have a method that you can do these things quickly and get it through, and the reconciliation's easier. You don't have to worry about rejects. So a lot of the first use cases weren't there for retention. The companies that are offering them to the bank's customers really saw a way to enhance their business models.
Yep.
And it's the end customer enhancing, and the bank being an enabler of working with the small business that they have to say, we can help you in a new way of business to enhance the value of your business to your customers. My favorite is, there's a press release, it's called driveway.com, and they buy used cars. And again, driveway.com, they show up and you have they do a bid or whatever, and they're going to offer you $5,000 for your car. They walk to you, they send you an RTP. That's their competitive advantage against Carfax and whoever else. They give an RTP, irrevocable. Me as a consumer doing that, so they enhance their customer model by saying it's irrevocable. I'm going to give you the money. I'm not going to pull back an ACH from you. That money is in my pocket as you turn the ignition and you run away. That's what RTP, that's the power of what an instant payment money now can do. I'm a bit of a Pied Piper. Sorry, guys.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And, really some great examples there. And I think really highlighted, why participating is important on the receiving side. I'm going to pivot a little bit now to the other side of the equation is, originating the payments. And today we know there's, a handful of financial institutions doing a lot of the origination. A lot of the ones on the network are still in receive mode and moving towards origination. And just wondering maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on the business case that financial institutions are seeing when it comes to actually stepping forward and being an originator of payments. How's it benefiting them as that originator?
Yeah, origination is 2 things at a bank, right? I consider it your bank customers, right? So you're increasing your product offering to your bank customers, and there's usually some revenue associated with that, right? You're offering them a way to make a payment, and you're charging them for making a payment. Just like you charge a wire in an ACH, you're going to be charging an RTP. So you have a revenue there. But I also think a lot of the benefit that we're seeing in some of these is the bank forgets about is bank as a biller. So one of the, we have a financial institution on the network, and they're not in the top 10 in transactions of send, but they're the number 2 in dollar amounts. And why does that matter? They do auto finance lending. They are getting, the bank themselves are sending out to the dealers auto finance loans. And they're doing it on weekends, and they're doing it after 5 o'clock at night. How many consumers go and buy their cars 9 to 5? How many of them go on weekends and go after 5 o'clock? So their auto finance division internally has just, the minute you disperse that loan is when you start charging interest. So if you're dispersing it at Friday at 5 o'clock instead of Monday at 8 a.m. when the other payment method rail is open, you've lost interest. And what's the average car loan now? About $65,000. It's turning out. And this is a bank, and many community and credit unions have a lot of auto finance loans, personal loans, home equity loans, mortgage loans, loan disbursements. When I talk to banks and they're coming on board and they're thinking through their send journey, like look internally. Operational efficiencies, revenue. In this case, the revenue here, there's operational efficiencies, number 1, but number 2, revenue is a stream of interest revenue that they would probably not think of. The same with many banks, community banks, and even credit unions. They issue credit cards and do balance transfers, cash advances. So the cash advance on a credit card starts the day that you disperse. So if someone wants a credit balance refund, do it by an RTP, give them the cash. That interest starts the day you send that. And you don't have to worry about Monday through Friday. You now have Saturday and Sundays, and you have 24 hours. So there's a lot of internal. One of the best ones I saw for a credit union, I just thought it was so smart. And this is what comes up when banks and the bankers, they know their bank and they got a whiteboard and they're all sitting there going, what can I do now? This credit union issued auto finance loans, and they took for payment credit cards as a payment, which is amazing to me, right? They allowed me, if I had an auto loan with them, I could call them up and I could pay by my credit card. So you're saying, what the heck? They do credit cards and then they're not going to get an ACH settlement for 2 days. So they're really, they're letting you pay, which makes sense if it was delinquent to me. You don't want to go into delinquency and all that. But there's a cost of doing that. So what they end up doing is they realize that the merchant settlement company that they used did RTP. So they get the money same day because they did on their side as a bank, they enabled their merchant settlement for same day. So they don't lose the funds anymore.
Yeah.
So there's so many great intercompany back and forth, end of year, end of quarters to make sure when you're doing intercompany that it's in the right place, the money's in the right accounts, all these kind of unique to these banks. And I don't think many times that is put in the business case, but these are real good business case. I mean, you have new product revenue for your customers, but look at bank as a disperser. One bank I love, they do customer, office of the president. So, those unfortunate people that call because they're mad because you took a $15 fee and they close their account and they're mad at you and they're going to call you 52 times. And you give them ACH or a check and they keep calling you every minute. What is it, $5 a call? It used to be when I worked a long time ago. All those calls and the aggravation. Can you imagine? I'm on the phone complaining to you. You give me the RTN, and as I'm complaining, the money, $15 is in my checking account. There's never a second call.
That would be, that would be great. And I was even thinking about your auto loan example there. The number of times where depending on the dealer you're buying the car from, if you're trying to buy that car after hours or buying it on the weekend, you as a member or a customer of that bank or credit union, you may not be able to do it because you don't have access to those funds, right? And it's difficult to get them there. So definitely having that money be able to move real time is a great value. It can definitely see that across the board. One other thing I'd add too on the origination front is, just servicing your corporate or business customers. I remember one of the use cases related to gaming wallets. When that first started, one of the banks piloted gaming wallets with one of the companies in the space. 9 months later, that company won an award within the gaming industry for most innovative processing solution. Another 9 months after that, all of their competitors were doing it. This had become table stakes, right? So from proof of concept to actual table stakes in an industry, only 18 months, right? Well, if you're a financial institution and you happen to have had a customer in that space, you better have had your instant payments available, or that market was going to pass you by. And by the time you actually launched the solution, your customer may have gone to someone else to get it who was already there. So there's definitely value there for servicing your customers and being there to service them when these new industries pop, and they seem to be popping relatively quickly based on some of our earlier discussions.
And to the point about helping your customers, and small businesses especially, they get challenged with cash flow, liquidity, and middle market customers. You add RTP to your portal, so I can pay my supplier. You might, that small company, middle market company might have a shipment that needs to be released, and their vendor supplier will not release it until they get good funds, and they can do it immediately. And the best part about it is that a confirmation is sent immediately. So those funds are there. It's the only payment method that has a built-in confirmation. That confirmation is so valuable to your small businesses and middle market companies, big companies too. But they want to know that the payment's there. It's not like ACH. You send an ACH and you hope it's there 2 days. Usually is, because it's a dependable network, but you don't know. You only know the negative if it comes back 3 days later. You don't know the positive. And in 15 seconds, you have a positive that it is in Dean's account, and he can't lie to you to say, check never received. It's there.
Yeah. Or as a sender, you forget that Monday's a holiday. I think we've all done that every now and then. Well, hey, listen, we have about 5 more minutes of questions, 5 more minutes of conversation before we get into audience questions. I think the last one I'd like to pose to you is, it seems from our conversation that the value's there for FIs to move forward with RTP, whether on the receive side or, for that matter, on the origination side, which is where I think some of the even deeper value is. However, I think as we've talked to financial institutions, there's still a lot on the fence. And they're wondering, how big is this deployment, or what are some of the hurdles that they're facing? And I'm just curious, from your experience, what are you seeing as some of those, top 1, 2, 3 hurdles that those institutions are facing, and how are those who have gotten on the network overcome them?
I think the hurdle number 1 is fear of the unknown. It sounds so big, and it's just, we haven't put a new payment network in place in 50 years with ACH, right? So and now they say ISO, like, you got to be kidding me. I've been used to a NACHA format, and now someone's saying ISO 222 as if, it's like sliced bread and I know what they're talking about. So having these terms at you that just give you a start is what I see in many financial institutions, where it's like, I don't want to start. I don't want to show that I don't really understand all this. This is new technology. This is new. I don't have the resources. I got so much other things on my plate. I don't know if this is really a priority and value. And, I think what they need to do, number 1, is talk to someone. The best thing is, if you don't have a strategy plan for your company or your payment strategy, then you need to go talk to someone. So, what is, where am I today? Where do I fit amongst my peers? What are my options for going into this new realm? You know, 90% of those banks that I just mentioned don't connect directly to us. They use a third party. There's so many third parties out there. I mean, I've seen third parties come on board in 2 weeks. Depends on the relationship you have with your third party, but having a trusted advisor partner, such as SRM, someone that knows the space to say, you know, there's options, there's stages. We don't recommend, and that's another thing, the full end-to-end. We have 485 banks that are on receive. That's the beginning of the journey. After that, there comes a time, when do you go to send? You know,
Yep.
find the most, the critical path to get on receive, learn, realize that you guys have been doing 24/7 for a long time that you don't even know of, that there's not a real heavy lift to your customer service people, the way it works, there's no day two, all those concerns about building back office departments for rejects, that's all gone. You know, they don't believe it until they see it. So learn with someone that's been through this, and then let them go through. Especially, I think it's very important of working, if you can, with a third party. If you're going to a third party service provider, my number one suggestion is make sure you have an SLA, and your trusted advisor can help you work on an SLA with that third party service providers. They are not all created equal. It's in any kind of third party vendor relationship that any bank has with any vendor. You want to protect yourself, you want to protect your customers, you have SLAs that have to be maintained with the network. The third party service provider is not the member of the network, the FI is. So making sure that you know what you should be expecting from them, and then working internally to bring all your stakeholders in early. Your fraud people are going to be freaking out. Your compliance people are going to be freaking out. Your marketing people, your service people, you want them in the beginning, right? You want everyone involved, and you want to go through what's real and not what's an urban legend. And you want to be able to have a very focused, smart project that you'll find is not a 12-month project or longer. It could be a month to 3 months to get you up and running, to get some of the immediate benefits. And then you'll go into phases to go into send and some of the RFP. I don't know if that's what you wanted, but that's what I would suggest.
I think that's awesome, and great, you know, just some great insights there as to what has to happen. And it really aligns with the discussions we're having with financial institutions as well from SRM, is, you know, what they're thinking about, what they need to be thinking about. So awesome stuff. What I'd like to do right now is just take a pause and see if we've got some questions out there from the audience. Larry, I see a hand raised for you, so I'm going to hand it off to you to kind of jump in here. And Lou as well.
Thanks. And Cheryl, I really appreciate you coming on, and that was really informative. And RTP is making a big impact for financial institutions. I guess I have a question / comment, and I'd be interested in your thoughts. So, you know, we've got a lot of technologists on the call, and a lot of us are looking at things like blockchain and the regulated liability network, and hearing the BIS talk about unified ledger. And, you know, some of the benefits of those that I see as potentially, maybe in addition to RTP, are, you know, eliminating some of the reconciliation needs, you know, the programmability of money, you know, the ability to do those kind of transfers internationally, particularly in the case of like regulated liability network, the ability to send and receive both assets and liabilities, multiple types like real estate deposits, securities. The question I've got for you, because I know RTP and Clearinghouse is not sitting on its laurels, what kind of technology enhancements are you looking at making to the network to maybe compete with some of those new technologies, the blockchains and the regulated liability networks that are coming? And some of those are also coming at, you know, through banking coalitions and groups. So, you know, if it's similar to, I think, the way the clearinghouse was originally set up. So with that, I'll pause. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, right. We have a technical team, right? We have an in-house network that we built for this. It's built on newer technology for 6 years ago, right? We didn't lift and shift pieces of the ACH or old wire system. We built it natively using, you know, what was technically cutting edge in 2017. In the meantime, our technical leadership are continuously, to your point, looking at evolving that, looking at cloud, looking at blockchain. I know there's discussions here. How do we fit that out? So there's a continuous evaluation while we're still going into our BAU, because you're right. We don't want, you know, we're not going to invest in old systems. This is the new platform to invest new functionality on and to expand to what the market is. So one of the first things I can say is, you mentioned cross-border. So we've already done a prototype with cross-border because the premise is that you have a lot of real-time payment systems in an ISO environment throughout the world. How come you have to have correspondent banking? Why can't you just connect those ISO, the US system with Singapore, with Australia, with Canada when it shows up, you know? Well, with SEPA, we did, and we had press releases on, we did a prototype technically it works. And we were able to work it, because even though everyone's on ISO, every country is not harmonized, right, on every data element. So trying to figure out, and then the FX, we worked on the FX. Where we get stuck in everything is not the technology. We have the technologists like yourself that are thinking long-term, that know technology, know what they're doing. Where the rubber hits the road right now is in governance. The laws of the US, the laws of Singapore, the laws, how do you put a governance around exchanging these technical messages, which is the easiest part to exchange right now, to putting a layer of compliance? You know, one country doesn't have as stringent AML laws that maybe the US has. Fees, taxes. So we're moving ahead. That's still on our roadmap. We haven't stopped, but the items aren't technical in nature. They're governance in nature and country differences. So a great question, because everyone asks us, yeah, right. We're pipes. Why can't we exchange securities? Why can't we exchange cryptocurrency? Right now it's US dollars only. And but we have a strategic and an innovation team talking through this, saying we can't rest here. We have to continue with the technical knowledge for evolving to make sure, especially security. The big thing for us is security, right? We move trillions of dollars a year with wires, ACH, and this. Our technicians are continuously monitoring the cybersecurity realm and bringing new tools in there. Last thing we need in the United States is some money to be, taken. So I think my answer to you is technically top-notch technical leadership here, but getting to some of the, especially the cross-border, it's less a technical problem today than a business, governance, legal, compliance issues that we're working through, and we'll get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, great answer there, Cheryl. And I think the cross-border was an interesting one. I was just listening to another podcast earlier this week about a large bank that does international processing. And they said they're in 90 countries and they support instant payment networks in 60 of those 90 countries. So just to show how prevalent instant payments are, and that what the power that could be unleashed if we start getting those to be talking to each other is pretty impressive. I'm going to switch to another question here. Lou, it looks like you have your hand up.
Oh, thanks, Dean. Some early when Steve Ledford would talk about use cases, kind of what you went through, but earlier on, a couple of areas that he said were promising. And sorry if you already said this and I zoned out or something, but one of the big promises was real estate closings and title companies. And when I asked my friend who works at a title company, I was kind of floored. 8 to 10 payments is a typical closing, with most of those checks being written out and handed to the real estate agents, the attorneys, the HOA, all of these checks being given out. You seeing some of that activity moving onto RTP?
We're seeing baby steps. I've spent a lot of time last year at Alta, FLTA, all these, local, title company, and they're interested. They haven't embraced it as much. And I think what I'm seeing is they have a lot of legacy infrastructure, and it's a very fragmented. So I think the top 3 title companies, is maybe 40% of the industry. And then it's just, it could be small businesses. And then you have the escrow model where lawyers pay it and it's not title companies. And then the other real big handicap right now, if you can believe this one, is that, surprising, they're regulated by state law. And in many of the state laws, it specifically says wire. And no matter how many times we tell these folks that this is the same as a wire, when you look at the attributes, the laws say wire, and they will not use RTP. There's activity going on and advocacy on some of these states trying to get them to change that to ETA. So there's so many, which is shocking to me when I go speak to these industry groups. One of them, I won't even say what state it was, and it's a very high real estate state. Their advocate, their legal person said to me, well, our law says ETA. I said, that's electronic ETF, electronic funds transfer. I can get you something from our lawyers to say that an electronic funds transfer is an RTP. And they will not until it's changed to say RTP. So to me, in the real estate, that's what I have found is the biggest burden, more of like, I'm going to go, And then the other thing is a couple companies, a lot of, we talk about ERP systems for traditional B2B. I think, as you well know, in real estate, they have their own applications. So we've actually worked with 2. It's a company called Payments.io and EMT Transfer, and they provide payment software to title companies and real estate entities. And so they have added RTP as a method. So we're starting to see volume from them. Again, the intermediary, helping them with their payments, making the intelligent decisioning. They've added RTP through their bank. So trying to work both sides of the aisle with the vendors that help on the payment processing, going and just educating, and then trying to support some of the activities the advocacy are doing at the state level. But yeah, we think that is like, it should be going gangbusters. So do the banks. And it just seems to be a real hard sell.
The other area that was interesting to me because I knew nothing about is factoring. And if you've ever heard of factoring, and I didn't know about factoring, I have a neighbor who's in the trucking, in a basically a single person business, which is brokerage. And there are so many steps in the process of item comes in via ship, like in California, and then there's transport to a distribution center, then transport to a warehouse, and transport. And each of these entities want their money sooner, but will not pay until they receive. But the trucking companies need their money sooner to pay drivers and pay for fuel. And so there's a huge industry, like millions and millions of dollars in lending because there's no instant payments being used there. And like 15% interest is what they get for, or about a 15% cut is what they're taking. It's not really, it's a very short-term loan. And it's like instant payments could so solve all of this.
Well, it's so funny you should mention that. We were talking about marketing and marketing messages for this year, and we're going to target some of those trucking magazines or whatever, because we did find, when I talked about the 213 originators, it's an Excel spreadsheet. I go through it sometime and then I'll look, and I couldn't believe I found like 10 factoring companies, and they're already using it. Small volumes, they're local, but I was like,
promising.
wow. And another good one, which is not just the factoring, but those independent contractors. So if I'm a truck driver, and this is what's coming to me from the community banks, right? Because a lot of these small businesses, smaller middle market, are in the community and credit union realm. And what this one guy does is that he's, there's many truck drivers in their community, and the truck drivers do a load for Procter & Gamble, right? Instead of going to factory, there's now these new gig economy that will say, I'll buy your invoice and I'll pay you, it's $1,000, I'll pay you $990. And then they're using instant payments to give them their advance on their invoice on the independent contractors.
Right.
So there's a lot, to your point, there's so many of those unique, where can you add business value by using an instant payment?
I think that is such a great point there, Cheryl, about the unique use cases. And I'm glad, Lou, you brought up the questions about real estate. And it's crazy when you look at it. And just one quick data point before we wrap up, and I'll go back to real estate, talking to some of those large title companies, you look at the number of wires that they're doing, that they're regulated to do, 15% of those wires are under $10 in a closing scenario, with hundreds, sizable percentages being 1 and 2 pennies. Because when you're doing the closing transaction, it has to be balanced to the penny. And if a calculation is off, they're making an adjustment. So there's just so many opportunities to roll up your sleeves. And I think exactly as you summarized, Cheryl, look for where payments are being made and where there could be business value to doing it better and smarter, and then fill in that gap with instant payments and RTP. So with that said, we're at the top of the hour. It's been a great hour. I'm guessing we could probably sit here and talk about this for another hour, but we probably all have lives to move on to. So Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us today. Very informative. For everybody in the audience, thank you for joining. Please tell your friends that we do this. It's an ongoing session. And also this recording will be out on YouTube in our channel. And I know we'll send some information out afterwards, but feel free to share it as well and help to continue the momentum here we're trying to build around instant payments. So thank you again, everybody. Have a great evening, and we'll be talking together in the near future.
Hi, thanks.